I'm Susie.
And I'm Lisa, and this is the Coaching Cast. We're the no nonsense podcast, chatting about the things impacting you at work right now, helping you to survive and thrive in today's workplace.
We discuss different topics in each episode, sharing our ideas, hints, and top tips from our experiences of working in the corporate world, running our own businesses, and also being qualified coaches. And we try to have a few laughs along the way too, because, well, taking yourself too seriously is a bit boring. We hope you enjoy listening. Today, we're diving into a big topic, managing change at work. Whether it's a new boss, a team restructure, or a whole company shake-up, change is inevitable. But it doesn't have to be unnerving. We explore and offer our experiences, tips to survive and even grow through change. So stay with us and enjoy. So Lisa, before we get into today's brand new episode on dealing with change, how have you been?
Yeah, no, I've been really good, thank you. I've been really good. Enjoying some very enjoyable social occasions, actually. I've had some quality girl time. Quality girl time. Been spending a lot of time with my girlfriends here, which has been really, really nice. Specifically, my friend Tessa, who celebrated her 40th birthday a week ago.
Oh, happy birthday, Tessa.
Happy birthday to Tessa. And it was lovely. We had a great time celebrating her 40th and meeting a lot more of her friends. And which I really enjoy. I really enjoy meeting people. I'm sure our listeners won't find this surprising. I do enjoy meeting people. I mean, I think I can be I'm a bit of a social dork.
Right, okay.
So I think
there's a story here.
There is
I
a
feel
story
it
here.
coming on.
There is a story here. So, I am really enthusiastic when I meet new people, possibly painfully so, maybe even slightly embarrassingly so. Like, if I had children, I would be that parent for sure. I would definitely be embarrassing to them. I think I can be embarrassing to my husband, Dom, at times. And I'm sure my closest friends will be listening to this and just cringing because they know what I'm talking about. So I'm always super enthusiastic when I meet new people. And there is an element here of like desperately wanting to be liked. Like I want to be liked immediately. And so there's that people pleaser that comes out really strongly and where I want to be everyone's best friend. And I want everyone to walk away going, oh, Lisa, she's just so nice. That is me. It's really embarrassing, but it's true. That is part of my ego. And so on Friday last week, that was 100% triggered because I walked into this venue on my own, and that doesn't bother me either. But when you walk on your own into a group of people and you only know like one of them, there is that go big or go home, in my opinion. Like I don't creep in, like I like thrust myself in, and it's always like with full force and energy and arms in the air and hi. Type affair. And this was taking place in a restaurant that has this really lovely bar attached to it, and they have like little booths. And so a lot of people were sitting around the table in the booth who were there already. So I stroll up to the table and say hello, and I'm sort of making my introductions. And there's someone behind me, and I turn round and I go to hug them. And they stick their hand out to give it a shake. And I was like, oh, that's very formal. So I shake the hand. But it's this very awkward,
Oh, this sounds like
it's like a hug.
Story.
It's not a hug. It's not a hug. We're going in for a handshake. So I'm doing this kind of weird dance with this complete stranger. Yeah. And then the way they introduce themselves is so formal that then I start being really like, oh my God, I've just tried to introduce myself to the waitress. Because they were behaving so aloof from the table, because they kind of had taken a step back from the way, where people were sitting. They didn't look like they were joining in. And the way they were dressed was quite formal. So I suddenly thought to myself, oh my God, I've just tried to hug and make best friends with the waitress. This is really awkward. Like, this is going to a whole new level of me being a complete dork. And I was thinking, oh my God. And so I ended up like kind of jumping out of the way and moving to the side and being very apologetic. Anyway, it turns out this person was not a waitress. She's actually one of my friend Tessa's best friends. So I am so grateful now that I didn't say to them, "Oh God, I'm so sorry. You're trying to get a drinks order. Mine is a margarita, please." Because then I would have looked even worse. I would have looked even more stupid. So thankfully, it actually was one of her friends. Um, but it was just, oh God, there were just so many things going through my mind at that time. I was like, it was already awkward
Yeah.
anyway. You narrowly, by like a whisker, missed it from being even more bloody awkward by, starting to give them your order for a margarita. So thankfully that didn't happen. By some miracle, I
Okay.
actually saved it because that never happens. I always, if I'm going to make a tit out of myself, I go all in. I mean, there's no like small measures. So the fact that I
Oh,
managed to avoid this was a miracle.
yeah. I mean, so do I. I mean, I feel like this has definitely got links and parallels to stories that I've shared on this podcast, like the time where I tried to accidentally got a French waiter
Oh,
to
yes.
like put sun cream on me, on
That's
my
right.
shoulders.
I remember that story. That is funny. I
And
forgot
then
about that.
also when I was in a pub in my village and I was telling a story, and as part of the story, I said, "Excuse me," but I said it so loud that the actual, again, waiting staff in the pub turned around to me and said, "Yes, like, can I help you?" I was like, "Oh no, no, I wasn't talking to you. I was just replaying a
Oh
story." Like,
God.
honestly, this is like something that would, I'm like, this is just normal. This is
Yeah,
just like
true.
a normal
I'm
thing.
sharing it with a sympathetic ear, someone who really can understand what I'm going through. But yes, it was funny. And then actually the girl that she was stood with, this particular lady who wouldn't hug me and I shook my hand, she gave me a hug. And I actually, while hugging this other stranger that I didn't know, turned to this woman who'd shook my hand and went, she gave me a hug.
Oh my goodness.
And then like admonished her. I admonished a complete stranger, just ripped them. Anyway, that was the kind of tone of our
Okay.
relationship for the rest of the evening. Because actually,
Oh,
this girl and I actually ended up getting on really well. She's got like the driest, darkest sense of humor, and it's quite hilarious. So it may have started strangely, but like most encounters do with strangers. I mean, like
yeah,
there's an
of
awkwardness because
course.
you've no idea who each other is, but it
Yeah.
actually ended up very well. But no, it was a great evening. I had a wonderful
Good.
time. Um, got dressed up. Love getting dressed up. Um, I've got this velvet two-piece that I decided to bring out here, and I wore it, and it's nicer than it sounds. It's nicer than it sounds. It's from Mango. It's only like a couple of years old, but wearing a velvet two-piece in Cape Town is slightly ironic because it's always bloody hot and sunny here. So I did wonder whether it was a poor outfit choice. But anyway, luckily the aircon was fierce where we were, so I stayed warm with my velvet two-piece. What's so funny about me saying a velvet two-piece? It's really nice. It's a velvet top and
I'm
trousers.
sure it is. It's just I wasn't expecting you to say velvet two-piece.
A
Like,
velvet two-piece,
it just
which
really
for
made
anyone
me
who,
laugh.
for anyone who's listening in the UK, they'll be like, a velvet two-piece in May? This feels really out of season. It is turning into
It
winter
is.
here,
It
people.
is
It's
nearly
turning
winter,
into
guys.
Southern
Yeah.
Hemisphere. Think of it in Australia. They're going through the same thing. It's getting
Uh,
colder here. So actually it was appropriate. But weirdly, we had a hot spell on Friday and I was starting to think, damn it, I should have got the linen out. But anyway, I wore my
oh
black
gosh.
velvet two-piece and I was very happy with it.
Well, I'm glad you. Yeah, I'm glad that
You're
you
happy
had
for
a
me with my
lovely
velvet
time
two-piece.
and nailed the outfit. You know, I love
Yes,
an outfit, so
you
that's.
do love an outfit. You do.
Oh gosh, I so overpacked on my holiday trip because I just love an outfit, and the weather was changeable, and I was like, I don't know what to pack, and so I just packed everything, and
Was the
then
weather nice in Como? Lake Como? Was it nice?
um yes, so sea beavers have been to Italy, very nice, Lake Como. Weather was lovely when we were there, but it rained before and after. So the day we left
Oh.
and before we arrived, it was raining. So we had this really nice like few days where it was sunny. So yeah, but it was the weather forecast was really changeable. So that's
Mm,
hence why I overpacked.
yeah, yeah.
I went with options. Anyway, this is yes, not very interesting chat for a podcast. Um,
Yeah,
but
but
before we move on, what I will say is on that interesting chat, I am currently I've got a coffee in a mug that's been personalized to me, and I think you're going to like what it says on here. I didn't realize I'd picked this mug up for my morning coffee this morning. It says running ship like Captain Sandy.
oh bloody hell.
And that's because my friend and one of my clients, Emma, bought me this mug as a gift, and my nod of love to Captain Sandy. And I
From
know
below
how much,
deck,
and
yes.
Below Deck, and I know how much you love a little nod to Below Deck.
God, I don't know anyone who loves below deck as much as you do.
Oh, God. Who doesn't love super yachts?
Oh, well, it's not that part of it that I don't appreciate.
Listen, I'm manifesting my best life by
Who
watching
doesn't
Below Deck.
who doesn't love super yachts? Good point. Right. On that bombshell of exclamation, who doesn't love super yachts?
Listen,
Let's chat about change.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. At this point, I could call in a super yacht. I could be a bosun. I've watched that much of it. Like, anyway, we'll end there and let's talk about dealing with change.
Yeah. Yeah, look, if it all goes tits up, if this isn't the job for you, you've got other options, eh? Other
I'm
options.
I'm going out to sea.
You're going,
Anyway,
you're going out to sea.
let's be honest, most of us don't love change. Even if the end result is good, the process can feel messy, uncomfortable, squiggly, or even a bit scary. Change threatens routine, identity, and our sense of control. Even if we intellectually get why it's happening, it can still kick up all the emotions. Our brains are wired to seek certainty. It's part of how we manage threat. So when things shift, maybe suddenly, it can trigger that ancient fight or flight response in us. And yet, change is constant in today's workplace and even world. Promotions, behavioral change, role redundancies, or redundancy transformations, it's all happening all the time. Then add in change fatigue. It's no wonder it can be tricky coping with change when it happens. So, Lisa, how do you deal with change first off?
So I am one of those individuals who actually love change.
Okay.
I find it exciting. I find it invigorating, rejuvenating. I always see it as an opportunity and an opportunity to try something else, learn. I think there is an element of me of always really appreciating newness. So I think I've been someone who's always conscious of being static, of stagnating.
Yeah.
I feel like I can get bored quite easily. Um, so generally, I really enjoy change. Definitely in a professional sense, I would say. Like definitely in a professional sense. I think in a personal sense, I'm very in the middle.
Okay.
And actually, the irony for me when I was thinking about this is that I have gone through a lot of change over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think you and I were having a conversation about the volume of change that I've experienced personally when we were recording the last episode.
Yeah.
And I think you stating it to me like that made me really think, actually, I really have, and I never acknowledge it. It's just not something I give any thought to, and I don't give it any weight. So I have this real attitude of it's just life. You've just got to crack on with life. Life can be changeable. And I don't really dwell on it, but in not necessarily dwelling in it is, because it's not about dwelling it, it's about acknowledging it. I don't even acknowledge it. And then I then seem to be questioning why I feel the way I feel.
Yeah.
So I actually, it's this weird relationship I have with change where I really like it, I really enjoy it, I find it really exciting. As I said, very specifically in my professional life, that is me 100%. So I've gone through many periods of change in my professional life, and when I've worked in businesses, and I've worked in businesses that, to be quite honest, I felt like what they were trying to be good at was change because that's how often they did it. Um, so that element of change fatigue, I have experienced that many a time in my professional life. That is like very separate to me to like how I feel about change in my personal life. And yet it's actually probably in the last 5 years, it's my personal life that's gone through the most amount of change. And I always feel like a bit discombobulated from it. Like I just go with the flow, and it's like my body and everything is just going with it. But my brain is always somewhere far behind, as though like all of a sudden my brain catches up and goes, oh, I feel really unsettled. I feel really anxious. I feel exhausted. I feel, yeah. And it's suddenly like I go, oh, I wonder if that's because of I've gone through loads of changes and loads of stuff has happened to me. It's really weird. It's like I can't associate everything clearly together and have everything working in together in a personal sense. It's weird.
Yeah, like being in flow with it,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah. But I have a tendency I just get on with everything and don't stop to think about it. And it is a bit of a coping mechanism, I think, in my personal life, because my intention is always just to be agreeable, I think, and just to get on with it and try stuff out, just see what happens at the end, and just assume always that I'll be okay. So I
yeah,
think it's an element of that. Like I just don't give it any thought. I'm just like, just get on with it. Um, and that's definitely been true of the last 5 years when I've left corporate. I got involved in my husband's business and I ran a pub for 2 years, and then I experienced COVID like we all did. And a lot of the time with COVID, my coping mechanism was to pretend like it wasn't happening, because I actually think I found it much more challenging than I credited at the time.
yeah.
And then we sold our business and my husband came out of it, and also my husband was taking a break, and I decided to do my job full time. And then I've been very transient in where I've lived for years, because I've lived partly in South Africa and I've lived partly in the UK, and then I've moved house in the UK and I bought a house, and that's quite a big life change. And then I've had challenges with my health, and I've had challenges with fertility, and I've, like, and now I've moved to Cape Town full time. It's a bit nuts, like when you think about it in that context. Like when I list it out, I'm like, bloody hell, I have navigated a lot of things.
Well, I think it's some quite significant things in a quite short space
Well,
of time.
yeah, and that, yeah, yeah, yes, it is a bit nuts. But I definitely think there's that separation for me of experiencing it, which is a bit not always particularly helpful. It's like as I said, it's creating that barrier is helpful to cope with it in the time it's happening in many ways, but actually it's not
Yeah,
really that helpful for more of a like a long-term approach. Um, but professionally, yeah, I do really enjoy it. I do find it really interesting. And I don't think you'll find that surprising, because you and I are both disc practitioners, and you know my disc profile. And
I do.
that is kind of a key part of my profile, is that like newness and variety and things changing, and that is me, um, for sure. Um, but I do think it comes to a point, and that fatigue in my professional capacity of changing constantly, I do get that. And I've
Yeah,
worked, as I said, in businesses that were just kind of a bit obsessed with change, I would say,
yeah,
like never allowed a change to settle and
yeah.
kind of
I've
prove
worked.
itself
Yeah,
before it
yeah,
wanted
on
to
that.
change again. And definitely one of my last corporate roles, that actually was that was the key decision maker for me as to why partly what I left at that point. I was like, do you know what? I've done my time here. I can't just keep delivering aggressive change. That isn't really what I feel is the purpose of my role. That's not my aspiration for myself. That's not what I want to continue to be involved in. I
Yeah.
actually want to be involved in like delivery and um establishing and embedding success. And I think, yeah, that was that disconnect between like the organization and their purpose and what they were driving. I was just like, I don't agree with this. And that is a hard part of being a senior leader, I think, when you realize that you're just constantly having to deliver what you don't believe in anymore and what you don't want to be doing, and delivering messages that you don't want to be delivering.
Yeah, I think the change fatigue bit that you just mentioned there is a really important one because I think, well, I know it's going on so much at the moment. A lot of people are experiencing this. The world is changing very rapidly around us. it's impacting lots of different systems and and people within that and societies hugely constantly, one kind of thing after another, and it's unanticipated and it's evolving, especially around the tech side of things, so quickly. So you can't kind of ever get hold of it and then understand it and then move with it. And not everybody's in that place where they're kind of fearful of it. I've definitely spoken to people who are, especially around the tech side of thing, curious and embracing it and want to understand more about it. There's always, I suppose my point is there's always a scale with this
Mm.
around, kind of change. Um, I think you touched on a really interesting point there around, for you, is that there's a separation of how you deal with it. So like you talked about how you deal with it. You love it more professionally, maybe not so much as much personally, just because you've been through a lot of it
Mm.
recently.
Mm.
I suppose I'm quite consistent, I think, in the way that I deal with change in each of the aspects of my life. Um, and there's a theme there. And again, this links back to my personality as well, interestingly. So mine is that again, I am up for change. I like change. I like progressing. I like moving forward. I hate stagnation. Like it drains my soul,
Mm.
my energy, my kind of I like being engaged around improving and what's next and creating kind of action around that. Find that, like I've said before, quite energizing. But where I'm not great when it comes to change is when change is suddenly enforced upon me and I either haven't had an opportunity to input and collaborate on it, and that links to my personality preference, or I don't see it coming and I suddenly am in a place where I have to figure this out or deal with it or think about what this means, and then want to kind of work my way through that and get back to a level of kind of, I suppose, status quo, but I don't quite mean it like that, but a level of kind of rhythm quite
Mm.
quickly.
Mm.
So it's like I can embrace it when it happens. And, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's hard. I've been through some quite tough things as well, in the last kind of 10 years that have definitely wobbled me, and I've had moments. I'm not just like, oh yeah, cool, this is fine, like let's crack on. Um, there's still some kind of emotion there for sure, and some learnings and some ups and downs. But I feel like once I've kind of processed that and dealt with that, I can get back into it quite quickly.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I'm not great when I suddenly have it forced upon me and I've not had an element of collaboration input. And actually that really came to light at work, when I was in my corporate career, not in my last couple of roles actually, in more of my like middle management roles. Um, I basically hadn't been involved in some planning for a change program. I hadn't had any involvement in it. I didn't know it was coming. I didn't know what the purpose of it was. And then one day I just got told that I had to go and basically deliver this message to a team that I was responsible for, that there was change coming, and that actually it wasn't positive change, because remember, change can be positive as well. It was negative change, and that there was going to be some redundancies as part of it.
Mm.
Oh my God, I lost my mind. I lost my head. Like I couldn't do it. It it was like I found it personally really hard to like listen and understand and think about what I needed to do. But also secondly, I was like, this is so like not linked to my core values around, ideally like collaboration and thinking about people. I just was like, I can't go and do this. Like this
Mm.
is so hard. And I really struggled with it. I found it really, really challenging and really difficult. And I don't think at the time I had the self-awareness to know why I found that so challenging. I do now. But I remember in that scenario, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't go and have these conversations. And actually, the change then changed. The change then changed. So I actually ended up not having to go and do that. Somebody else was who had been more involved in the creation of what was happening, applying on the happening, did that, and I was kind of just them kind of part of it rather than like delivering the message, if that makes sense. Um, But yeah, God, I remember that scenario where I was like, I really, really can't do this.
Mm,
Really struggled with it.
yeah. And I think there's so many things that you've said there, which I think align with times when change is very challenging to deliver or initiate, possibly is the right word there, and when it can go wrong. And I think it's that not being involved in the
Yeah,
decision,
definitely.
not having the full understanding of what is driving the decision, having no ability to personally digest and process that decision and what the ask is of you before you're having to engage many people in it, so that actually you haven't had that space yourself to react and to be able to digest and consider how actually you're going to do what's being asked of you in a way that feels true to you.
Yeah,
Um, I think there's such key parts as to what makes as a leader who is being asked to initiate change or announce a change. I think that's many of those things is what makes it so incredibly challenging to do and to do it well. Um, and also that mention of not being aligned to your values, that disconnect where there's that misalignment can be a really big challenge to overcome. Because often, especially in that, as you said, that middle management role, you're often being asked to communicate to many, many people across the organization. Some massive decisions from the C-suite, from the execs, but they won't be decisions that you yourself have had the opportunity to influence. Not always, but it is the expectation because it's deemed to be your responsibility to drive them. And that is so hard. It really is hard. And it's not realistic to say that that's not a part of your job. I think it is just a given. I think you have to accept at times that
yeah,
you'll work in businesses where things are expected of you that possibly you won't agree with. Um, and it's how can you navigate that as best as you can in a
yeah,
way that feels authentic.
yeah,
But that
absolutely.
is challenging, I think. Um, and I've definitely been there.
Yeah, I
I've
think,
definitely been there.
you lead into a really good point around how to manage change in the workplace, how to do it well, and also how when it's done not so well,
Mm,
what are some of those learnings?
mm,
I think I always remember there was a great a great leader that I used to work with, a lady called Emma, and we were going through a change program with some of our sales team, and she said this to me, and it just for some reason it's really stuck in my mind, and I think it's still valid today. That she said this to me probably about 15 years ago, and I think it's still valid today, which is around when you are a leader, you need to turn up when times are good, but also when times are challenging.
mm,
And um, the kind of context to that was that there was some senior leadership who we were going through a big change program. There was going to be a big briefing around what that meant and what that resulted in. And again, it was going to be probably likely that there was going to be some shifts in roles and kind of heads and things like that, number of heads. And we were having this conversation because some of the really senior team weren't going to be. It said they weren't going to be at that briefing, and I remember being like, "But that's not cool." And I was a lot more junior at that point, but I was like, "That's not cool because
mm,
they're meant to be the kind of you know role models of this change and the." Ambassadors or advocates, I suppose, of why this is the right thing to do. And that's when she said to me, like, you're right, because to be a good leader, you've got to turn up when not only when times are brilliant and everything's in flow and performance is there and everyone's loving life and it's all good and rosy, but also when times are challenging and potentially tough as well. And I think that still stands. It's that's not to take away from the fact that it can be a challenging experience for you personally as a leader, if you, especially if you've not done it before, it's not something that you naturally lean into, you don't agree with, like you said, and you don't have the skill set to do, and you feel like you don't have the knowledge to do it. I'm not taking that away, but the fact that I think just fundamentally your presence,
Mm,
especially at such a critical moment, you can't underestimate the impact of that. And that always stayed with me. And when I then progressed in my leadership career, I ended up in a position a few years later where I was doing something similar. And I was kind of one of the most senior people around in that kind of function and role. And so I went to kind of another briefing where there was going to be some change communicated, more to just show my face in the room, i.e., I will turn up for you when times are tough and equally when times are good. And I remember somebody came up to me at the end and said, "Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you just being here and being open to questions." And I wasn't leading the communication, but I would have if that had been like what was needed, but it wasn't because I had a brilliant team around me. But it was more just to show my presence of like, I'm here if you've got any questions, if there's anything you need to ask. And I think I didn't realize until I'd experienced that a few years down the line that the power of that in terms of people's engagement and people then kind of just being like, oh, okay, yeah, she's kind of got this and
mm,
got us, I suppose, is my point.
mm. I think it's so, so important to be present, even more so in the tough times when you're a leader. And if you feel uncomfortable or you don't want to be there, my view is tough shit. That's your job. And if you don't like it, you shouldn't be a leader then. And that might sound harsh, but the fact is you've stepped up to take that responsibility. That's what
Yeah,
you're
for
getting paid
sure.
for. And if you don't like it, probably should be doing it then. And I am really harsh about this kind of thing because I've worked in businesses that hasn't had that consistency of leadership and which have gone through some really challenging times. And let's just say not all the leaders stepped up. And I've had those as colleagues and I've been led by those types of leaders and they don't breed respect from me. And I think when things are really challenging, it's about I want to work in the spaces where the leaders acknowledge that and they're honest about it and they're transparent about it and they support each other through it and they support their people through it. And the best businesses I've ever worked in are those types of environments. Um, I think that's your responsibility as a leader. I really
Yeah.
do. And it's one I take really seriously. So I have been the leader who's been asked to deliver some really challenging messaging that has been asked to announce redundancies to a room full of people without any certainty as to who will be made redundant. You know, I've had to go into those scenarios with very vague information. And I've been really honest about that. You know, and I think that's a really important thing here. Like it's one of the things about delivering change that I think works best is you communicate as much as you can, as often as you can, even if that means saying, don't know yet.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
because I think through any change, people at some point, even those of us like myself who find it exciting, there will still be moments of uncertainty and discomfort and even anxiety because us as human beings will jump to the negative to prepare ourselves. It is what is often most prominent in our thinking. We go to all the things that could possibly go wrong. It's a defense mechanism. And so if you leave gaps and don't say anything, then people will start letting their imagination run wild.
Oh yeah,
And
they'll fill in those gaps
they will fill in
themselves.
those gaps. So
Yeah,
actually, even saying, I don't know, or we're not there yet, or that's not been
yeah,
decided, it helps to fill the gap with something. And even that gives reassurance, I think, that you only know as much as everybody else does, and we're not there yet. So it was always really important for me that that I always said something, even if the honesty was, I don't know. I don't think there's any shame in saying that. And I think you're better to say something than nothing at all. So
Absolutely.
that was always something that I was always really clear about when it came to delivering change was I will communicate as much as I ever can at any given point. I will share everything I have. I will be honest when I don't have anything. I'll be honest when I don't know things. I will give updates that are still nothing yet. That is still an update. And that was really key for me. And I still think that's a really important part of giving change is to communicate, even when you're communicating nothing. And keep people as involved as you possibly can. Um, you know, I often think people navigate change so much more effectively when they feel a part of it. And it's like
Oh, for sure.
they're able to determine a role for themselves in it, that they're able to take action, that they're able to have some form of responsibility. It gives them that sense of control. And that often is what people appreciate because change being done to people, people feel out of control, and that's what they find frightening. Um, I think that is so important. So they can feel a part of it. And like I said, it's not being done to them. Um, and I think giving people as much notice as you can. Like your story of being told, like, this change is happening, can you go deliver it? I do think, I have had those moments in my career when I've been a leader, and that's exactly has happened to me. I have pushed back. I have said, I will announce this, but I need more time. I need time for myself to digest it, to process it. I need to
Yeah.
think about how I'm going to word this. If you want me to own the announcement, if that's my responsibility, then to do that in a way that I feel able to, I need some time to think through how I'm going to say it. And I
Yeah.
don't mean a lot of time. I mean, like, give me a couple of days, but like, don't thrust it upon me and think that I'm just going to be able to walk out there and deliver what you've told me. I won't be able to do that. I won't be able to do
Yeah.
that in a way that I feel able to do. Um, I've definitely pushed back in those scenarios. And also, I've pushed back to give me more time to better understand it, to get my head round it, to be able to say, okay, I don't necessarily agree with this, but I understand the logic. So now I've got a better understanding. I can now more confidently deliver what you've asked me to.
Yeah, because I think if there's any hesitation or there's any doubt
Oh my
there,
God.
people will pick up on it. And again, they'll fill the gaps.
But they
And
also
remember,
blame you. They'll make it about you.
exactly,
You're the messenger. They will shoot the
exactly.
fucking messenger. Like that happens. I've seen it. I've seen car crashes. I've seen my senior leadership team do this and be like, oh my God. It
Yeah,
happens.
it does. And I think the other thing just to say here is that the principles that Lisa just outlined before around, clear communication, frequency of communication, um, are also principles that apply to any form of change. I know we talked before about kind of quite extreme change in the sense of role redundancies because we were
Mm.
just linking that back to our stories. But also, I think that those principles still apply in terms of like digital transformation projects, any behavioral changes, like, in terms of, I don't know, competencies, any parts around, you know, promotions even as well, and positive changes.
Yeah. Any
So
change.
any change this applies to. And I think the other side of this as well is if you're listening to this as a solo business owner or a small business, and you're thinking, well, okay, this doesn't apply to me, but you're still going through and dealing with changes probably more than ever actually at the moment. I can vouch for that as a business owner because things are just so wild at the moment. Um, what I'd say for you in terms of managing change, potentially well, is those principles also still apply, but you've got to potentially apply them to yourself. And that's the bit that we can get like tripped up on. And I think if you're in that place where you're finding dealing with a lot of change quite stressful, quite anxiety inducing, the first thing I would say is reach out. You need to go and reach out to your network, whether that's a coffee, whether that's a friend, whether that's a coach, whether that's a mentor, whatever that is as part of your community and network. Just get out and talk to people because that will really help you with not just sitting in your own thoughts, especially if those thoughts aren't great because you'll feel like everything's changing very quickly, because at the moment around us everything is changing very quickly.
Mm, absolutely.
Okay, so if you if you're leading through change right now, because some of our listeners may be listening to this and thinking, okay, this is me in my context, in my world right now. You've touched upon some really great principles in the conversation before, but just to kind of wrap this up then, what are some of your tips for how you can do this effectively, and also maybe some top tips for dealing with change?
So we haven't spoken about this yet, but I think it is such an important first step. And that for me is why this change and why now? That has got to be the first thing I think to do. I've worked in organisations that initiated change so quickly with no proper forethought. Or
Yeah.
no apparent forethought, sorry. That's probably unfair. No apparent forethought. But let's just say there was not enough stress testing done on a decision before it was rolled out. So I really do think the first thing has got to be that stress test. It's got to be why this change and why now. And the why now is so important as well, because again, it's not necessarily at times that I've disagreed with the change that's been recommended. It's the timing that's been totally shit. And it's like, if you just thought through the timing, actually, this change could have been rolled out so much more effectively. So that's the first thing for me. Why this change? Why now? I have said it already, but for me, it's communicate, communicate, communicate. Communicate even when there's nothing to communicate, and say so. Say there is nothing. I think that you can never have too much communication through any form of change. The third thing is tell a story. I think when you've decided that the change is going to be, really, really be clear and specific about what is the story of this change, what has driven it, what has come before, what is happening right now, where do we want to get to, what is the outcome we're striving for. I think the most successful changes I've ever delivered have been where that story has been really clearly mapped out and we've been
Yeah.
able to engage people in it, because it's not really at times the specific change itself that's significant. It's everything around it and what you're trying to achieve from it. That's the significance. And that's the part to really get people connected to. I think involve people as much as possible. I think you should do that from the point of first thinking through why this change, why now. I think stress test it with some people that you believe are appropriate to do it with to get their thoughts and perspectives. But I think involve people as much as possible. And then finally, for me, it's the be present. You've said it already, and I just couldn't agree more. I think you've got to be present throughout, and the harder it is, the more visible you've got to be.
Got to be. Um, yeah, I think I can't emphasize that enough
Mm,
either. I've just seen and experienced when that hasn't been in play, and the impact that that has is so significant, but it's
yeah.
invisible
Mm,
and it destroys morale, it destroys engagement, it destroys trust.
mm,
And then when you get through the kind of change per se and get out the
mm,
other side, you're absolutely then screwed
mm.
because the trust is gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then it won't ever deliver the outcomes that you hoped and wanted it to deliver because of that. And it's just, yeah,
Yeah.
really, really
Yeah.
significant.
Totally agree. Lean into the discomfort. If it's uncomfortable, tough, so be it. But you've got to lean into it. You cannot avoid it. Not unless you want to kill your career, to be quite honest. That's me like being super harsh, but I cannot. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm like, sorry. Shit gets uncomfortable. You've got to lean into it. Otherwise, you're going to destroy your leadership reputation. So,
Yeah. And I think, again, just to bring this back to anyone who's listening who isn't working in an organization and is maybe working in a smaller business, these principles still apply, but I think apply them to yourself where
mm,
relevant. And also, I think seek out support. So, just talk to people about what's going on right now, how you're feeling, where you're at, what you're maybe planning in terms of a change, or what you're thinking you're going to do, or what you're experiencing. Just do not just every day sit with your own thoughts in your, office or wherever. Just go and talk to people.
Mm.
That's the one tip I would say if you're in that scenario, will help.
It's now time for Bullshit Bingo, where we call out phrases which get commonly used in the workplace, which make us cringe. Our Bullshit Bingo for today's episode is toe the line.
Amazing. Toe the line.
I love this one, toe the line. Gosh,
It's
episode
that
99 and we haven't had toe the line. Love
I
it.
know.
So good. Toe the
I
line.
know.
This is really funny. I love this one.
And it's a bit below deck this as well. We were talking about below deck before. Toe the line. Toe the old got to toe the old lines in on the boat. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
Just see this
Classic.
toe, this big toe. Ooh, toeing the line. Yeah, I love this. Toe the line.
Classic.
It is a classic.
Classic. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have definitely said this. Probably more in the past than current. I'm not very toe the line anymore.
I was about to
That's
say.
gross. I make my own lines now. I just do what I want. Yeah, no, brilliant one. Love it. Classic. Yeah, how have we not had this
I don't
before?
know. I think this is amazing. I'm like, we haven't had it, have we? It is very good. I do love it. Very good. Thank you very much, whoever supplied this one. This one's a good one. This one is a good
Absolutely.
one. It's a great one to have for episode 99.
We are coming to the end of today's episode where we've been discussing the topic of dealing with change. So, our top tips and recommendations from today's episode are number one, why this change and why now? So, some pretty critical questions, I think, to just reflect and ask. Number two, communicate, communicate, and communicate with a lot of exclamation marks behind it. So even if you have nothing to say that, okay? So make sure that you're just always communicating as much as possible. Number three, tell a story. So tell the story of the change. What's been the chapter before, the chapter now, the chapter after? How does that then lead to the destination, the outcome, the conclusion that we're trying to get to? Tell a story of the change. So, so important. Number four, involve people as much as possible. Stress test that initiative or that change, whatever it may be, and just make sure that that has got involvement, collaboration. I talked about my story where I hadn't had any input, which sometimes will happen, but actually, if I had, my response may have been different potentially. And number five, in capital letters, be present. We've talked about this a lot. Make sure you are present as much as you can. You need to be. This is where that kind of role as a leader, this is it. This is what we're talking about. This is match day right here. Okay. And also, I think just to add to that, what we said about if you are a solopreneur or a small business owner and you are working on your own, also just make sure you're reaching out and having conversations with people and building support around you. So we're jam-packed full of top tips on this episode. We've also got some self-coaching questions where you can ask yourself. So number one, what am I feeling about this change? And what might be underneath those feelings? Number two, what is within my control right now? And what do I need to let go of? Number three, how can I reframe this change as an opportunity for growth or learning? And number four, what are you going to do differently? Don't worry if you can't remember all of these, because that's a lot of tips and self-coaching questions, just an abundance of help and support there. They will be on our Instagram page at the Coaching Cast and also on our LinkedIn pages following the release of this episode.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to look up our episode on managing your resilience. It's in season 1, episode 4 from February 2021.
Oh, the back catalogue.
Wow, the back catalogue. And you can listen to this episode wherever you get your podcasts. Now, talking of episodes, we will have our final 100th episode for you next month in early July. Our centenary. It's our centenary.
Da-da-da-da.
Think reflection, joy, and celebration. Everything we do best here at the Coaching Cast as we toast with you our 100th episode. CBBS, we know you're busy, but it would mean the world to us if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the Coaching Cast wherever you listen. It takes seconds and it's absolutely free to do. Or why not tell one person in your life who you think this podcast might help? Pass it on, send them a link or even a specific episode and help this podcast to grow.
We like to end each episode of the Coaching Cast with our personal song recommendation, giving you energy and motivation as you launch into the next part of your working day. It's my choice this week, and I've chosen Laura Branigan, Self Control, highly influenced by Radio 2. So I'll just put that there. Right. See you next month, CVVs, for our big 100th episode. And remember, you've got this.